Chapter 11. The first day working out in the fields with Jabba was horrible. The second day was worse. The third was worse still. The fourth was a bit better. The fifth was better still, and then it was Friday again. By the time we went back to work on Saturday, my back was feeling stronger and I'd stopped aching all over. I was developing quite good muscles in my arms too. I couldn't resist showing them off to Musa. "Yeah, cool, Mr. Universe," he said, hunching a shoulder and turning away. I saw that I'd hurt him. He wouldn't have minded a few good muscles to show off after all. Sorry, I mumbled, but that was only making things worse. After 3 weeks, I was picking up stones as fast as Jabba, which really annoyed him, and I could let my mind go off into its usual daydreams. The shop I would have one day, the money I would earn, the car I would buy, the look on Ma's face when I poured a gold necklace into her hands. There was only one good thing about those early days on the farm. Ma started making a fuss of me. She even rubbed olive oil into my cracked hands every evening. Uncle Mahmood was a good boss, I suppose. He didn't make us work more than 6 or 7 hours a day. He paid Baba for my labour, so I never saw any of the money, but I expected that. Baba brought stuff back from Dara when he came to visit. Food, medicines, a new cardigan for Nadia, and shoes for Floyd, so I suppose I was helping my family, at least. As the summer got going and the weather got hotter, Uncle Mahmood took us off stone clearing. Auntie Fazia had been bringing on tomato seedlings in the farm courtyard, and it was time to plant them out. Weeding, watering, that was how it went from now on. But at least I didn't have to put up with Jabba on my own. Auntie Fazia and Ma came to help in the field too, leaving Aman and Granny in charge of Freud and the little girls. It sounded as if it was just a hard grin on the farm. A hard grind on the farm. Nothing but back-breaking work on my lousy cousin Jabba, but at least we weren't about to get bombed or shot at. Things weren't as bad now in Bosra as in Dara, and as Bosra was closer to the village, we could hear the shelling and gunfire even more closely. Most of the time while we were living on the farm, I tried to ignore what was happening outside in the rest of Syria. The thought of it just made my stomach tighten up. It was different for Musa though. He was itching to get back into the action, to be with his friends doing something in the struggle against tyranny, as he put it. He would splatter with rage too about the lunatic phalanx in the north, with their black scars hiding their faces, their habit of blowing up Syria's priceless ancient monuments, their mania for cutting off people's heads, blowing themselves up and selling people's mums and sisters into slavery. "Do you think they might be a bit right?" I asked Musa one evening, partly to get him going and partly because I wasn't quite sure in my own head. He wrinkled his nose as if I'd made a bad smell. "Are you crazy? You think what they do is good? That it's Islamic?" "I'm only saying, Jabba says..." "I thought you hated Jabba." "I do, but we have to talk at times. And he thinks those guys are a bit, well, cool." And then I wish I hadn't said anything at all, because Musa gave me a lecture that seemed to last forever and quoted chunks of the Holy Quran at me, and then he told me that Jabba was turning into a fanatic. And Ma told Auntie Fazia, and Auntie Fazia told Uncle Mahmood, and Uncle Mahmood gave Jabba a rocket, and the next day Jabba gave me a black eye, and I had to pretend that it was the donkey who had kicked me, which it might have been, as a matter of fact, because the animal had hated me from the very beginning, so it's not completely out of the question. It might sound as if I'm really shallow, but probably the thing I liked most about being on the farm was the food. Auntie Fazia was a brilliant cook. She and Ma and Granny sat together for hours in the afternoons on a mat outside the kitchen door, sorting through pans of dried lentils, picking out all the little stones, while a man looked about after the younger children. Then they'd go into the kitchen and the loveliest of smells would come wafting out, and at dinner time we'd sit down to eat stuffed cabbage leaves with pomegranate sauce, and minced lamb with spinach and wedges of lemon, and fresh eggs and beautiful bread hot from the oven. I could tell that Ma was happy. She and Auntie Fazia had become almost best friends, and now she had an ally against Granny. Every now and then Granny would let out a screech of fury at Musa or me or Aman if we broke something or a little rule or, whatever it was this time. But this now meant she was outnumbered, and she knew it. It was late in July when things came to a head with Jabba. All through spring and early summer I'd had to endure his stupid teases, tricks and insults. I don't think I'd ever hated anyone before, but I really came close to hating him. It was a Friday afternoon, the best time of week. We'd got back from the mosque and eaten our way through Auntie Fazia's huge weekly feast. Now we had the afternoon to ourselves. I was sitting in the shade outside our storeroom house, idly watching Freud picking up wasps of grass and feeding them to the donkey. He loved the farm. He was quite happy chasing the goats and going off with Auntie Fazia to look for the eggs the chicken had laid. Then Jabba came out of the house and saw him with the donkey. "Do you want to ride him, Foyd?" he called out. "I'll lift you up if you like." Jabba was nice to Foyd. I'll say that to him, and Foyd loved him back, which kind of annoyed me. A moment later, there was my little brother sitting on the donkey's back, squeaking with pleasure, and Jabba was leading him around the courtyard. Then Jabba saw me. "Hop off now, Foyd," he said. "It's Omar's turn." I nearly dropped off, but I opened my eyes at that. There was something in Jabba's voice that was making me wary. Anyway, I didn't want to tangle with that donkey. He liked me as little as I liked him. "No thanks," I said. "Your big brother's scared," Jabba said mockingly to Foyd. "You wouldn't be scared, would you, Foyd?" "You shouldn't be scared, Omar," said Foyd, looking uncertainly at Jabba. "He's really nice. It's fun riding him." "Nah, he's scared," repeated Jabba. At that moment, Nadia came trotting out of the house. She was always picking up words and repeating them. "Scared," she said. "Omar, scared." That did it. I was being mocked by my own baby sister. A red mist of fury rose behind my eyes. With a roar, I jumped up, ran across to the donkey, and somehow, with a wild flailing of my arms and legs, managed to get onto his back. "You have to kick him a bit to get him to go," Foyd called helpfully. I sensed Jabba doing something behind me, but I was too afraid of falling off to turn around and look. I gathered up the reins and steeled myself to kick the donkey's flanks. All of a sudden, there was a loud bang. The donkey bolted out of the courtyard and galloped down the lane with me clinging like a monkey to his back. I know I said I was brave, and I know I said I dodged a gunman and been shot at and survived the shelling of our street, but those few minutes on that donkey's back were the most terrifying of my life. His ears were laid back, and he belted down towards the cistern at the bottom of the slope, swerving under trees so that I had to lie down along his neck to avoid being whacked by the branches, while far behind me, Foyd was yelling, "Omar, make him stop, Omar!" and Jabba was laughing like a hyena. I don't know how I clung on. In the end, I was halfway off the side of him, with my arms around his neck. He came to a sudden halt right beside the cistern, so sudden, in fact, that I flew right over his head, crashed down on my front against a low wall that ran around the top of the cistern, and landed with a splash in the water. The water felt icy, the cistern was quite deep, and I went right under. Coming up again with my mouth and nose full of green slime, I tried to spit it out, but the blow to my stomach had winded me, and I couldn't take a breath. I stood up with only my head and shoulders out of the water, gasping and choking. Then I started seeing black spots behind my eyes, and I passed out. The next thing I knew, I was lying on the ground with Jabba pummeling me on the chest and Foyd shouting, "Omar, are you drowned? Say something, Omar!" Another whack sent a stinking stream of stagnant water shooting out of my mouth. Then I turned over to my hands and knees and was violently sick. So much for Auntie Thasia's Faraday feast, I thought. I looked up at last and glared at Jabba. He must have read the rage in my eyes, because there was an anxious look in his own. He was wet through, so I suppose he must have pulled me out of the water. I wasn't about to feel grateful, though. It was still hard to breathe, but I managed to gasp out, "You tried to kill me!" He flinched. "I didn't, honestly, Omar. Don't tell my father that. I didn't. You set off a firecracker. You made the donkey bolt. It was just a bit of fun. Can't you take a joke?" "Not a joke. You tried to hurt me." He scowled. He was becoming his hostile self again. I lurched my feet, still feeling shaky, and pulled off my sodden shirt. "Foyd," I said, "lay this out to dry, then take the donkey back to the farm. I've got something to sort out with Jabba." "You going to fight him, Omar?" Foyd said anxiously. "Baba doesn't like us fighting," he said. I didn't take my eyes off Jabba. "Just take the donkey and go." Foyd looked from Jabba to me and back again. "Go on, Foyd," said Jabba. "If he thinks I'm going to fight him, he's got another thing coming." I waited, fuming, till Foyd was well up the path. Then I spat out, "Got another thing coming, have I? You're just scared, loser." He folded his arms. "Shut it, Omar. I'm not going to fight you." My fists were bunched. I was dancing on my toes, horribly aware of the wet trousers slapping against my legs. "Who's scared now?" I taunted him. "Look at yourself," Jabba said mockingly. "You're smaller than me, half-winded, covered in muck, and I'd beat you to a pulp. Not that I wouldn't enjoy it, but I'm not going to give myself that pleasure." He meant it. I could tell. I wanted to rush at him and hurl him into the cistern, but tears of humiliation were filling up in my eyes. I brushed him away furiously. "Why do you hate me so much?" I burst out. "What did I ever do to you?" He snorted disbelievingly. "You're actually asking me, aren't you? You really want me to do it, don't you? You've come here, all of you, living off my family, playing at being farmers. I work as hard as you. I've never worked, so... No, you've never worked at all, have you? You've been to a fancy school in the city. You've got an education. When this is over, you'll go back to your granny's posh, three-bedroom flat. And then you'll go to university while I'll..." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "You don't know what you're talking about," I yelled at him. "For starters, I had 2 jobs when I was at school in Bosra, and I had to be out of the house every morning by 5:30. Secondly, I'm thick, right? Not as thick as you, but thick. Never mind university, I won't even get into upper school. Third, Granny's flat in Dara isn't there anymore. The building collapsed 2 days after we got out, which you'd have known if you'd ever listened to anything any of us ever said. He had the grace to look ashamed. I didn't realise. No, you didn't think either, did you? Did it cross your mind that we have lost everything we've ever owned, except what we managed to bring here? I was still feeling a bit funny in the head. I turned my back on Jabba and went to sit on a boulder above the cistern, in the shade of the old gnarled fig tree. Anyway, I went on, Moose is the clever one, not me. That cripple, he can't even walk properly. How can that be true? Doesn't keep his brains in his legs, does he? I snapped. Have you ever listened to him talk about stuff? Why should I? He can't even speak properly. More fool you, because Moose is even cleverer than Aman, and she's practically a genius. Jabba frowned. So what? She's a girl. Really? I hadn't noticed. The burning sun seemed to be getting to him, and he came closer, squatting down under the fig tree, not too far away from me. Aman was going to be a teacher till all this happened. Jabba frowned. She ought to be married by now. How old is she? 17? Education's bad for girls, my dad says. So does mine, but it doesn't mean he's right. Jabba had sown an unpleasant thought in my mind. Now that Aman had to give up her education, was Baba going to marry her off? Was he looking around for a husband for her already? A fly landed on my bare arm. I flicked it off. Jabba, who had never seen me without my shirt before, was staring at the scar on my arm. What's that? He asked. Bullet wound, I said, as casually as I could. He couldn't hide the fact that he was kind of impressed. What happened? So I told him. I did exaggerate a bit. Well, quite a lot, actually. After all, I hadn't really dodged about between cars or felt bullets whizzing through my hair. I didn't bother to mention Musa either, but by the time I finished, I realised that I'd been talking to him as if he was a real human being. What was it like in Dara then? Being shelled and all that? I hadn't expected the question, and I didn't know how to answer. I still had bad dreams about bombs falling, and a man with a little girl in his arms running through the streets. Not much fun, I said at last. It had been a while since I'd thought about Granny's flat. I'd never liked it, but we'd lived in it for a year, and it had come home in the end. And then it suddenly hit me that we didn't have a proper home of our own at all now, and I started to feel cold inside. I was afraid that if I said much more, my voice would start to wobble. To break the silence, I picked up a stone lying at the edge of the cistern and sent it plopping down into the water. Omar, Jabba said quietly, don't move your foot. Keep still. Just don't move. What? Why? There's a scorpion right there. It was under that stone. Oh yeah, I said. He played that trick on me too often, but there was something in his voice that kind of chilled me. I looked down. There was a scorpion there, a vicious little black one, just 10 centimetres away from my bare foot. I let out a terrified yell and jerked my leg away as Jabba picked up a bigger stone and smashed it down on top of the scorpion. Then he prodded its little black corpse with a stick to make sure it was really dead, and flicked it into the cistern. Thanks, I said grudgingly. He shrugged. Put your shirt back on. We'd better get home.